Hey everybody, welcome to Origin Story Study Hall. I am Philip Russell and I'm with my co-host
Ben Thorpe.
And we have a special guest this week for our second episode of Study Hall. We have Autumn Wright. They are an anime and game writer whose work has appeared in Unwinnable, Polygon, Wired, Washington Post, and Paste, and many more. Autumn, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So Autumn, we had to bring you on. We read your review of Xenoblade Chronicles 3. We know that you are a Xenoblade stan, and Ben has been pestering me for weeks to get Xenoblade 3, and I did. So I think we all just wanted to talk to you about like the franchise and everything related to that.
We wanted to bring on an expert Xenohead, and I felt like you were the person. I've kind of followed your work for a long time, and I think for a while you have written about Xenoblade. I was kind of looking back at older pieces. There was a 2020 piece about the original definitive edition, and I just know if there's going to be a take on Xenoblade, it's like I should probably go see what Autumn has to say. So I feel like maybe the first question for you is like, what is your relationship to Xenoblade, and like why, like what attracts you to these games?
Yeah, okay. I think what attracts me, and I think like I have a certain kind of brainworms that Tetsuya Takahashi, the like lead creator behind the series, has, and that really is, we all watched Evangelion at like a formative era in our lives.
Yes.
All of us have. But yeah, so like 1995 or whatever, Tetsuya Takahashi watches Evangelion and decides to make it my problem today by making Xenogears and then Xenosaga and then Xenoblade. And yeah, like Xenoblade first came to the US in like 2011, and I wasn't like into JRPGs back then. I first tried playing Xenoblade Chronicles 3 on my like girlfriend's 3DS in high school, which is a bad way to try to play a like 80-hour JRPG, it turns out. And I just completely bounced off of it, and it wasn't until 2020 that I actually got into this, which is like very recent compared to other like really big fans of the series I know, but it was like the second big game I played at the start of the pandemic. And Definitive Edition had just come out, and like I'd seen 2, and like here's the way I approached this series. Definitive Edition came out. I'd seen stuff around 2. I really liked everything I saw. This like poked at something in my brain. That really got me excited. So I bought both of the games together, and was like, I'm going to sit down and I'm just going to get through whatever the heck I need to actually see what this is, because I know there's something there, and I just want to see it and know if I can like force myself to get through JRPGs, which I had not done too often before. So I did that, and it turns out, yeah, there's the things I thought would be there, like, there's something there that scratches my brain. There's mecha bullshit, there's anime bullshit. Can I say that on this podcast?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's all that stuff. And just, Tetsuya Takahashi's whole career just, like, really speaks to me, and I think all of us, the kind of things in media that interest us and stuff about bodies and machines and world building and speculative fiction, all of that is going on. And that, so that, really brought me down into the series. In 2020, I played, 200 hours of those games, played those into 2021.
Damn.
And then only had to wait, a year for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it turns out, which is astounding. Lucky for that. And now I'm waiting for the final DLC for this game.
Yeah, and so I think the next question becomes, so I think beginning of this year, saw this release was coming up, and I was like, I think I'm going to do it. And it was gently softballing it to Phil, where I was talking to him in the chat, and I was like, I think I might, what if I got into Xenoblade, just as a joke? It would just be a joke. It wouldn't be for real. And then eventually I was like, no, I'm definitely going to do this. But at one point, we reached out to you on Twitter, and we were like, hey, Autumn, should we start playing Xenoblade 3? And you were pretty adamant, I have to say, that we should not do that. You were like, the siren song of Xenoblade, you'll crash into the rocks, it'll destroy your life, your crops will wither, there's no point in doing this. Talk to us about why.
Well, I mean, like, it's not the best professional reputation to be known as a Xenohead, I gotta say. That's not a title I sought out. And I feel like you can only go deep into the series. You cannot be normal about these games. And it's like, it's a very, like, these games are very uneven. I love them so much. I also hate them a lot. It's one of those things. They're endlessly frustrating and endlessly fascinating, and they're also very long. And I'm like, I'm not entirely sure all the time whether there's enough there to merit going, 80 to 150 hours deep per game. Mm-hmm. And then when it's like, oh man, I've seen this, but it's like, maybe I would have a better appreciation of this if I went back to PS1 games. Maybe if I got into this trilogy of PS2 games, maybe then I would be okay. But you'll never be okay if you go down this rabbit hole. It won't end.
What do you think, like, maybe I'm jumping the shark a bit, but, quick history of my relationship to the franchise. I had bought Xenoblade Chronicles 1 on the Wii, like around like the Operation Rainfall, all that shit. And I played it for like a little bit, and I think maybe Zelda Skyward Sword came out around a similar time frame as it. And it was like I played a little bit of Xenoblade, and then Zelda came out, and I never played it again. Since then, I haven't played any of them until Xenoblade Chronicles 3, largely after reading like your article and Ben pestering me as he became a Xenohead. And I think like one of the things that you're bringing up, Autumn, is something that I've been thinking about is like, what do you think it is about the games specifically that maybe pushes you or anyone to want to do that deep dive? Because literally I started playing Xenoblade 3, really, really enjoying it. And it's one of those things, like, I realized this game is going to take me 80 hours or whatever to be. I'm 20 hours in, and I'm already like looking at the other games like, oh, okay, like which builds should I do for this game when I get there? And, all the lore and shit.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I just remembered, sorry to go a little out of order here, but I just remembered another part of this is I bought a Wii U after I got into Xenoblade. I bought a Wii U in like 2019 or 2020 because I wanted to play X, the mecha game.
That's exactly the one I was looking into. I was like, oh, this one seems sick.
Yeah. See, it's Nintendo's only marketing for the Wii U at this point is this series. So your question's like, what is that thing that's drawing us in?
Yeah, or like maybe even just for you, like, what do you think it is that like maybe has propelled you to go through all of these games?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, at least for me, starting with the first game, that more than any of the others, I think, is like capital R romantic. It is moving and it's hard to grasp onto. It's like, especially the first game more than any of the others, I think, it's less about plot and characters. It's not necessarily about narrative. It is about this world, and it's about wanting to see more of it. And you just want to struggle to find a place to latch on critically about what it is. What is it that's making me feel these things, But I'm just feeling a lot of things. And the designs, it gestures at a lot. At a lot of ideas, at a lot of feelings, the way that it uses mechs, the way that these mechs look, the iconography and imagery it evokes. Like, I want to find something that I can actually say, and I struggle to say the thing that it is doing. And so I just keep wanting to go further and further, to have a look closer. Maybe I'll reach a landing point in this journey, but never really do. And that's kind of unique, I think.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go on.
One of the things that I was like, and I have this geared up as a question, because I think to me, right away, playing Definitive Edition, one of the things that feels interesting and also feels very Autumn is that it is a fantasy in some respects, but it's also post-apocalyptic. It's futuristic, and I think apocalypse is really built into the DNA of this franchise. And that, I mean, you as someone who I've been reading for a while is very interested in apocalypse, feels like there's something there. And so, like, I don't know, is that, part of what we're talking about here in terms of what maybe pulls you in?
Yeah, Ben, you haven't seen the end of either.
I have not seen the end of either.
You don't even know, Ben. You don't even know. It's so much better than you can imagine. But yeah, no, I think like there is this also idea of cycles is built into this game. Cycles that revolve around ideas of apocalypse. And it is kind of, like there is this like, there's a meta narrative going on here, and there's a push and pull in following scripts and narratives and cycles. And these games are very aware of that and like aware of breaking the cycles. They're aware of like non-player character agency in a way where I feel like, especially in the first game, it's like things are resonating with each other in a way where it's talking about, gods, but the gods could also maybe be the player holding the controller. And it's like, it's just, all these things are resonating off of each other. Sorry, what was your specific question?
No, I guess I was wondering, you were kind of talking about trying to figure out what is it that resonates with these games. And to me, at least, I see a lot of your writing about apocalypse, and it feels like these games are really interested in kind of the end of the world and like what that means.
Yeah. It's like they kind of look like they're set in dying worlds. All of them are set in dying worlds. And I think about it, the first game, it's the decayed bodies of two titans that are the size of worlds. Like in the second game, the introduction says that there's this cycle of life that revolves around these smaller titans that are still like the size of nations. And these titans are dying off. The inhabitable land for humanity is fading away. In the third game is kind of this like stagnant world that's stuck in this moment of eternity, and is both kind of like dying in the sense that it is not progressing, and also the stagnancy is maybe starting to, the worlds are starting to kind of collapse on each other, and time needs to move forward for them to separate again and to like actually like grow and live. And like these are like just these are just like blossoming ideas that get me really excited, and like I think are interesting like on a narrative level, but more so on this like meta narrative level and this thematic level that are like this purely emotional level.
Yeah, I mean, I having only really spent a lot of time with 3, I can definitely see what you're saying. Like there's kind of like an intangible or like ephemeral quality to like the narrative and the presentation and the world that it kind of propels you to want to know more, to learn more. Like one thing that I've been thinking a lot about with 3 is that like the story, at least where I'm at right now, like resonates on one level of like thinking about life and like kind of living life to the fullest, and like realizing that you only have a certain amount of time on this planet, and like what are you going to do with it, and on some level like that's like a very earnest kind of storyline, very like anime in some ways, and like the cutscenes are like, they seem as if they're just drawn from the greatest hits of all JRPG and anime scenes of all time, which makes them always hit. But then there's like another layer of, when I think about like the mechanics of the world design, I'm finding like I'll like message Ben and be like, oh, I haven't progressed the story. I just keep on doing all the side shit that normally I would completely skip. But yeah, there's something about like how they've designed the world that makes me want to like talk to all the NPCs and like do the little side quests, even if they're just kind of bullshit like fetch quests. And I don't know. It seems to like speak to me on some more like soulful level than maybe another kind of JRPG or open world ish kind of structured game would.
Yeah, 3 for me lands on that level more than the first 2 games for sure. I didn't complete all the side quests for 1 or 2 because I didn't feel the need to. I spent, over 80 hours with the base games and those alone. And then playing through the base game of 3, I put 150 hours in because I wanted to do all the side quests, and I still like a handful that are not completed. 3 is, we're going here now. 3 is like Thrice Upon a Time for the series, and that it is like bringing the, like, I think we are probably familiar with the like Lacanian analysis of Evangelion in Sekai fiction as like having the level of the real, the symbolic, and the imaginary, and like the thing that is missing in Sekai fiction is the middle ground, the symbolic, the level of communication and community. And Thrice Upon a Time is like really like Evangelion returning to that. The characters grow because they find community and the ability to fucking talk to each other.
Yeah.
And like 3 really hammers in on that, where it's like there's agential characters outside of your party through the heroes. There are people that are progressing war efforts, but also building communities and having relationships, and like wanted to gesture at this stuff, but it's never the focus the way that 3 is. And 3 in this way is like such a more like horizontal game to me, where like at least as I was playing it way too much, way too quickly, like it felt like the story itself, the main story, was shorter, but everything leading up to there was like wider, and so I was spending so much more time at each step of progressing through the story, just added up to be so much more. And even if like the static horizon of Xenoblade 3 and Ionios is like less awe-inspiring, less moving the way that the romantic landscapes of 1 and 2 are, like that was the drive there. It was the community, it was interpersonal relationships, it was not the background, the literal background, both in terms of the landscape but also of the like characters and the world itself.
Yeah, and maybe just to tee this up for anyone who like hasn't touched or isn't going to play 3, like the story I think sets it up pretty well from the drop, where it's like it moves quickly. The idea is that you as a soldier have to fight other soldiers in order to kind of feed your time clock, which is the thing that your like individual unit needs to survive. And then pretty quickly the main characters are kind of freed from that, and then you have the option to start going around and freeing other groups from their own clocks that kind of keep them stuck in these cycles. And I think the thing that you're kind of talking about that was like amazing to me is that things that are not the main quest will be like rescuing someone from their time clock. There'll be like feels like a main boss will show up and you'll fight them, and that as far as I can tell is like completely side content, but it feels like very rich and important. I was texting Phil just the other day because there was like a question mark on my map, and I showed up and there was like this beautifully rendered cutscene. It was all about like this warring faction that was like hunting the main characters, and I was like, why is this like not the main like how is this just the side stuff?
Yeah, if you were to play 3 and ignore all that, it would probably look lacking. And like I think you're intended to get into that, but the like choice to present it as sides optional content reinforces the idea that you are going out of your own accord to help people in a larger community. You're developing networks, and like at a point over halfway through the game, all the people you've helped start helping each other, and it's just like my babies, they're growing up. They're doing good in the world.
Yeah, I think like I really love how you articulated it, Autumn, of like thinking about like Evangelion, Thrice Upon a Time, and how so much of that film is about community and kind of these characters finally communicating or saying the things that they need to say to one another. One of the critiques that I see about Xenoblade 3 when I look at like forums and stuff like that is people kind of talking about how like there's so many cutscenes, there's so many like extraneous little, like you walk like 10 steps and then there's another cutscene of them talking about some random thing. And I can understand that criticism, but on another token, I think it kind of speaks to what you're getting at of like, in a lot of senses, at least where I'm at in the story, and I realize there's going to be many more twists and turns to come. It seems like the game is really interested in just, community building, like a chosen family almost, and like how we communicate to one another. Like these kind of extraneous scenes are kind of interesting because we're seeing these warring factions, these people from these different ideologies being tasked with actually having to communicate and like talk to one another and like learn about each other, which I think makes, at least for me, like fun to like see those scenes.
Yeah, it's less melodramatic. It is more dramatic.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like the thing is, like in 1 and 2, the big scenes that are like these emotional moments that define what those games are to me are like killing a god, or the reveal of a character that you had no idea about that completely changes the script and what the rest of the game is like. Just completely subverts everything you anticipated. Thinking, I don't want to say too much details, I guess, since you're all playing the first 2 games still, but like with 3, it's this moment pretty early on in the grand scheme of things where Noah and Mio are kind of having this talk at a campfire at night, and the castle is on the horizon, and Mio is being very honest and vulnerable about, her short time left. And Noah fails to really empathize with her, or tries to help, but doesn't says the things that she didn't really need, and that pushes her away a bit. And, Noah has to sit with that all night and has to look around him so their other friends. Senna is like, Noah, come on, dude. Like, listen to her. That's not what she needs right now. And then they come back at sunset, and Noah and Mio reconcile and hear each other, and that's when they trade flutes. And it's just like, this is such a quiet moment compared to giant mech battles. And like a giant mech battle happens right after this, of course. But we actually get the quiet moments. The 3 is exceptional in that, like, there's actually really good dialogue. 1 and 2 are not operating on the realm of like very fanciful writing, whereas 3 is. That is also, they put a lot more effort into the voice direction of the series, and the translation work across the series is phenomenal, but like just really shines in 3 especially.
Yeah, I feel like early on, when I was like trying to sell Phil on this game, it would be, oh my god, like there was just this crazy mech battle. It looks sick, like it just looks so cool. But increasingly, I'll be like, that you won't believe what happened at this campfire scene. Like, it was really good. They had this great like moment. They were talking to each other, and it like really hit. And I just think that those smaller moments in a massive game like this, that also, like, to be clear, is very good at the kind of spectacle side of things, makes the spectacle a lot more meaningful when it feels like, oh wow, we're nailing the grounding stuff and making these relationships and these characters feel real and matter.
Yeah, I think the characters in 1 and 2 are much more archetypal forms.
Right.
And so, like, their specifics, their histories, they're less important. They are fulfilling the role of archetypes. Whereas, like, 3 has a lot of shonen tropes, especially, but the characters themselves are more complex, and each of the 6 main characters has a history that is more complicated and developed than any protagonist from the past games.
Yeah. I mean, and I think just like on another level, it's like the game, the presentation and like how they've kind of conceptualized some of the characters is just really nuanced and layered. Like, I mean, I think, like, again, like I was really resistant to pick up Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Like, Ben can attest to that. But I did, and I think like even like the literal opening of the game where you kind of get the tutorialization of like the battle system when it starts on this battlefield, similar to like Lost Odyssey on Xbox 360. and you're playing this character with a huge sword, the classic like JRPG trope, and then to go from that to he's also this person who has to send off the dead and kind of work in this sense of ritual that's based around like this community of warriors is really interesting, and kind of like an interesting layer. Or like even another scene that sticks out to me that's really small on the grand scheme of things is like in one of the colonies you're at, they give you like a place to stay, and Senna comes in to the room and is like, hey, I just had like a bath or something, you should hit it up, Mio. And Mio's kind of like writing in her journal and like thinking about how her time is pretty limited. And I think like even on that level of the team composition, I think a lot of JRPGs would probably just have the 6 main characters all essentially existing on the same timeline of like, oh, they're all gonna die in like a year. But I think it's like really interesting to have somebody like Mio who is kind of alienated from the rest of the group, because I mean her time is really limited, and that's like a really interesting way of kind of adding like those tensions and friction points just right from the start.
Autumn, is there something that we're not asking you about kind of this game or this series that you think is like really important to touch on, or is something that like really resonates with you?
I mean, I think like we haven't touched on the religious imagery or its roots in psychoanalysis. So like I said, like Tetsuya Takahashi is obviously inspired by Evangelion entirely. But like whereas Evangelion is really rooted in like Jungian and Freudian psychoanalysis and Christian imagery purely on the realm of aesthetics, Takahashi takes more Lacanian psychoanalysis and like a much more in-depth look at specific sects of Christianity and fuses these together in really interesting ways. Throughout the Xeno series of the past 20 years, there's like a lot of Gnostic imagery, especially. And Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is entirely just like you can map Gnosticism onto the world building entirely. And that makes sense because I believe it was Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst, like saw Gnosticism as this like attempt to make sense of the world through like the personal, and like basically like saw Gnosticism as like coming close to his understanding of the human experience, but like wanted to take it a step further with his psychoanalysis. And so like that makes sense. And so yeah, like going back to Xenoblade Chronicles or Xenogears, the first game of the series in like 1997, I think, on the PS1, like there's all this like biblical imagery. There's a wiki page for Jesus on the Xenosaga wiki. Like it's really in there. There's several demiurge characters. Like it's doing all this stuff. And Xenoblade as a trilogy starts with is basically this weird fusion of like religious imagery with various philosophical traditions. And so let me check the name of this author. Aaron Sudoku on withtheterriblefate.com has these great analyses of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 that's like this analysis of the games, like complete reading of their use of philosophy. So for Xenoblade Chronicles 1, it is Gnosticism, but it's also Gottfried Leibniz, this Renaissance era philosopher, and basically revolves around how both of these ways of looking at the world and understanding the world and completely different approaches use the idea of a monad. On the singular level, like Gnosticism has the monad as like the one unit, whereas Leibniz sees the monad kind of like an atom, but like an atom with like ethereal effects that is like multiple, and like the monad is the like thing that is these particles that move around in this determined way where like the future is set in stone, everything's going to happen the way it happens. And then in Gnosticism you have the monad, the one force that can manipulate all these things, and that's how you end up with the monado.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. It's like ether in Xenoblade is based off Leibniz's monads. and then the forces that control the world are based off the Gnostic monad. Like, it's this great fusion of these ideas. And there's a lot more throughout that game that gets into this stuff and represents that. Puts them in conversation with each other. And then Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is... I really like Sudoku's reading of the game as, like, this... the journey of the philosopher king. And it really maps well onto basically all of Plato's philosophy. Like, they're like, obviously the allegory of the cave and the theory of forms are kind of like the primary things, but there's so much more going on here. Particularly with the idea of Atlantis. Like, you could see that in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It's kind of, the specifics of it are very spoilery, but, like, yeah, it's, like, really interested in, like, what if we made a entire setting, an entire universe around Plato's philosophy. Like, that's so cool to me. And Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is swings heavily back into Lacanian psychoanalysis. And this becomes more and more apparent as you get to the end of it. So it's hard to say too much about it, but, like, it goes really deep. It's very obvious in certain ways, and like very, very particular in other ways. Like, it's like, what if we made a world? What if we said Lacan was right, and this is what the world would look like because of it?
How explicit is that, and how much is that kind of bringing philosophy to these games, and how much is like no, like, this is definitely a part of, like, what these games are doing?
There's a character in Xenogears named Lacan.
Oh my god.
Like, it's obviously this.
Yeah.
It's hard. Yeah, I mean, there's a character called, like, Yaldabeth in Xenoblade 1. Like, it's using these names. There's also a ton of, in Xenoblade 2, for example, like, going off of Plato's stuff, there's a bunch of characters who are only named with Greek names, which is also, like, you know, tied to specific traditions of Christianity, but, like, gets into the, like, division of the soul, and maps onto that explicitly. It's all right there. It, like, there's certain things where, like, yeah, so some of it's very, very heavy-handed. Some of it's, like, inferring a few steps, and I think there's room for different interpretations for sure, but Takahashi is obviously interested in these ideas, perhaps to a fault.
I'm kind of blown away by that Monado stuff.
I was fucked up because as soon as you
I'm
said
like dissociating over here. Like,
as soon as you said Monad, I was like, oh no. I don't know. For someone, I think maybe make a good place to wrap up is even though you are known for now trying to push people away from this series, what is the particular soup? What are the particular brainworms where you would say, person, there's a good chance you'll enjoy this?
All right. The thing about, I think personally you should start at the first Xenoblade Chronicles, especially Definitive Edition. It's a great format for getting into the series. And the thing about that game is it's like, spoilers if you can't read Shonen Trips, it's a mecha. That doesn't want you to think it's a mecha.
Mm-hmm.
It is a game where, like, you as the player are going to feel this uncomfortable relationship to your control over these non-player characters, or even the player character. Like, it's gonna start to feel a little weird, and if both in the terms of, like, your of agency, but also narrative script, and, like, kind of like at the end of Nier Automata, where you want the characters to break out of the system,
right?
Or like the thing that Final Fantasy VII Remake is doing, like, it scratches those brainworms so much in just like one solid game that is very standalone. You could play that first game by itself and never touch another Xenoblade again, and that's what I would recommend.
Be free.
Yes, be free, be ignorant, be happy. Yeah, so like, yeah, I think like those touchstones are probably a good way of approaching it. Evangelion, Automata, Remake, like if those are scratching certain itches for you, this is interested in the same ideas with some different perspectives. And I think, especially when like it comes to those, like the resolution, I think like I didn't feel resolved playing Evangelion watching Evangelion until I got to the end of the rebuilds. That's a lot of stuff. As long as these games are, Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is like an incredible standalone experience that like says all the things and puts you on the entire arc of everything. It was made as a standalone game. Like it works really well. And then if you like the like this like fourth wall breaking idea of like, yeah, we made a standalone story and then we broke the idea that it was a standalone story, then you can go on to play 2. And then you can get all wrapped up in 3. And like it just works so well that way. And also if you like theme songs, lyrical pop ballads that play when the credits roll that you want to listen back to and cry a lot, like it does that, especially if like they are literally just saying the themes of the games and like from the perspective of one of the characters. Like if that's the thing that you like, is so good for you, I promise.
Phil, how much of the theme music have you been listening to over the past like week?
I haven't heard any ballads yet, but I will say that I found like an 11-hour Xenoblade Chronicles 3 OST video, and I've listened to like 5 hours of it probably.
Yeah. But the worst thing about reviewing 3 was I heard both of its pop ballads, and I could not go on YouTube and listen to them immediately. I seriously went to the cutscene viewer, turned off the dialogue on my audio settings, and rewatched these in 20-minute cutscenes just for that one part, just to get a little catharsis.
Autumn, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us today. It was great talking to you, and thanks for being our Zito head.
Thank you for giving me a space to yell about these.
yes
Outside of my own head.
Yeah, maybe when Ben and I have beaten Xenoblade 3, you can have a full deep dive into all that happens in that joint.
I am supportive of this. Yes.
Well, Autumn, where can people find you? Is there anything that they should be looking at lately from you?
Yeah, you can read my review of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 on Polygon.com. You can also find my latest writing in my column at Unwinnable Monthly, and you can follow me on Twitter at the Autumn Wright.
Ben, where can they find you?
You can then find me at sad_radio_lad. You can also follow us at Origin Story _Phil. Where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at 3D Cisco, and as always, hit us up at our website originstory.show, or at our email theoriginstorypod@gmail.com. And as always, thanks to Melody Hirsch for doing the awesome design work for the website and the cover and all that, and Ryan Hopper for all the great music you hear on the show. Until next time.
Peace.
Bye.